Turn the lights on for the Tyler Bright and Early podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Bright, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football centered. Here we go. Our semifinal is set. We got the Fiesta Bowl. We got the Peach Bowl. The Fiesta Bowl is going to be Miami and Ole Miss, and the Peach Bowl is going to be Indiana and Oregon, a rematch of the regular season. A lot to talk about, a lot to dive into here today. We're going to start off in chronological order of the games on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So we'll start off with Miami's win over Ohio State. Then we'll go into the Texas Tech and Oregon game, the Indiana and Alabama game, the Rose Bowl, and then the thriller game in the Sugar Bowl between Ole Miss and Georgia. But starting off with Miami and Ohio State, really great game. Miami kind of owned the first half, and Ohio State kind of climbed back in the second half, but Miami at the end of the day was able to finish the job and do what they needed to do. A lot of impressive plays from that Miami side. I mean, the pick six off of Julian Sain to take it all the way to the house in the first half, I think that really set the tone. And I think if that did not happen, we would be talking about a much different game. But like Ruben Bain, all the stars that came out for Miami were pretty much did what they needed to do in order to win that game. Now, I don't know if Miami's going to continue the run, especially heading into the semifinal. I like the favorable matchup that they have in the semifinal against Ole Miss, and we'll talk about Ole Miss more in later. But can they hold it all the way throughout to win a national title? Their first national title since 2001. Time will tell. But I liked what they were able to do. Carson Beck looked pretty well. He was kind of conservative, but I mean, he did what he needed to do. He was able to convert on third and mediums a lot throughout the game. And that's pretty crucial, especially when you're in those tough situations against an Ohio State team who has a longtime NFL assistant at defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia. A lot of studs, a lot of 5 stars on that defense for Ohio State. And he converted. He was able to get the job done, and that's all you can ask for from your game manager to manage the game. That's all you can ask for. All you can ask for. And it wasn't your stereotypical Mario Cristobal team where they did control time of possession, but it wasn't for they didn't just settle in the second half for 22-minute possessions or 22-minute drives and so on and so forth. But they were able to try to create plays when they needed to make those plays, and that's the reason why they were the better team at the end of the day. But I think it really comes down to, for Ohio State, not facing adversity pretty much throughout the rest of the regular season. Now, I did think Julian Sain faced adversity throughout the game, and here's why. I think he did face adversity, struggled, had that really ugly interception in the first half, but came back, did really well. Came out there, looked poised, looked like he was in a great position to kind of get themselves back into that game. But the problem with that is he was never in that position before, which is wild to think about. He was never in the position before where you're down by only 2 touchdowns. He never faced any adversity. So of course he's going to struggle in that situation when the lights are bright. Maybe if they had faced Texas later in the season or whatever that may be, they just coasted along the regular season. And I truly believe if you're a championship team, you have to face adversity some way throughout the regular season. Or if you're not going to get in the regular season, at least the postseason. But at this point, it was just way too late. Miami was just the more proven, experienced team in that moment in those situations. So that's why they were able to come out on top. So that means Ohio State will not defend their national championship from 2024, 2024, heading into the new year in 2026. By the way, Happy New Year, 2026. Enjoying the new year. Make sure to follow us on social media this year. We're on TikTok, Instagram, and X. You can watch and listen to full episodes on Spotify and YouTube. Let's move on to the next game. The Texas Tech and Oregon game in the Orange Bowl. Definitely the least interesting game, I would say, out of the bunch, which I kind of feel like we got a nice wide variety of the results of these bowl games here in the quarterfinal. But Texas Tech, there was a lot of talk about these defenses, both for Oregon and Texas Tech, the defensive line for Texas Tech. And credit to Oregon's offense, able to put enough points, Dante Moore and company, getting the job done. They were able to get enough points, but you really got to talk about the Oregon defense that was able to have those strong stances and able to shut out the Red Raiders, they just could not get anything going on offense. And they mentioned it a lot on the broadcast, was a really dominated Texas Tech crowd down in Miami for that game, which is kind of interesting to think about. But I think it also has to do with, Texas Tech being in their first playoff game. Definitely could have added to that, added to those variables, I should say. But Oregon's the more experienced team. They move on. That's why they're heading into the semifinal to take on Indiana in the Peach Bowl. And that one's going to be a really interesting game, guys, which leads us to the next game. Yeah, Indiana and Alabama. Guys, Indiana's good. Indiana's good, guys. And they broke the stereotype of the first round bye. And the other teams couldn't live up to that expectation either. It's just the record is just now. I think it's a little bit different, obviously, with 2024 because you had Arizona State and Boise State. Like, come on, it's a little bit different now. But now this year, I mean, Georgia won the SEC, got the bye, lost to Ole Miss. Indiana won, but Texas Tech had the bye, lost to Oregon. And Oregon didn't look extremely dominant. They handled business pretty easily against JMU, but kind of is what it is. But yeah, Ty Simpson just really couldn't do much for that for the Alabama team. Then they moved over to Mac, and by that time it was too little, too late. Indiana was just humming on offense. I mean, Mendoza 14 for 16, like just cooking on offense and made it look so easy. Didn't see any different Indiana team that we've seen all year long, just dominating. Guys, they're scary. They're a scary team, and it's crazy. And I've said it time and time and again, is the way that this team has been able to just turn it around from being one of the losingest programs in college football history. Quite a story. And but now I'm kind of thinking of how Indiana's going to look a little bit forward. But we're jumping ahead here. So but yeah, I want to talk about this Sugar Bowl because I love this Sugar Bowl. This was a great game. In a first half where I felt like both teams, it was such a different game from the first matchup between Ole Miss and Georgia, where the offenses were just going at each other. They got a couple stops in the first quarter. Got some punts. They were like, okay, as long as we get Georgia to punt, we're good. And then they got Georgia to punt. And then it was a defensive battle throughout the first quarter. And then Georgia started picking up the pace, especially later in the second quarter, had the advantage heading into halftime. And then late in the third quarter, Georgia goes out with a fake punt late in the third quarter in a drive that I think that was pretty essential. And we talk about so much about momentum. Momentum is so important in a sport, especially like college football, because it ebbs and flows. And they were able to keep it going, and they only got a field goal out of that, which kind of hurt them in what they wanted to obviously achieve on that drive. But I liked it. I liked the call, and I thought it was super, super big cojones to be able to make that play. So good on them. But credit Ole Miss, they kept fighting. And they kept battling back in that game. And then in the fourth quarter, the Ole Miss stand against Georgia, the defensive stand, able to hold them off and only get them to a field goal to keep it tied at 34 apiece. And then Ole Miss gets it going, has a big 40-yard gain to put them into field goal range, and then they get it, and then chaos just happens. They have the kickoff. Georgia guy ends up taking it out of the end zone, wants to do like some rugby style play, and then they call it a safety. And then they find out that there's 1 second on the clock after the stage is already going out on the field, and everyone's all celebrating everything, the biggest win in Ole Miss history. And they're like, hold on, the game is not over. And then the fact that they, not only that, but then they said, okay, there's 1 second on that. Okay, but it was a safety. They did call it a safety. And so, okay, so Georgia goes and kicks. You think that, they'll just kick it. And even if they do recover it, it's still going to be 0 time on the clock, game's over. Well, oddly enough, they add a second. Georgia recovers it, but they don't take the second off of the clock. So then they run another offensive play, which maybe I'm a little bit misinformed in the rule book on that situation, but I think that's a little bit I don't know if that was the right decision. I don't know if from this. I think it was a yeah, it had to have been a Big Ten crew there today. I don't know. I was a little bit shocked about that. I was just like, really? Like, why can't they just run the clock out? I don't know. But so then they go and run a play. It goes on for like 30 seconds of them doing rugby style Air Force football, and then finally the game is over. and Pete Golding 2-0 while he's here in the playoff, and especially now with Lane Kiffin going over to LSU, the team it seems like they got the right mindset, especially heading into the postseason. They're trying to go and prove something. Trinidad Chambliss was able to do his thing, still convert when he needed to convert, and just a great job for this Ole Miss team as they head into the semifinals. So now we head on to the next part, which is the semifinal. You got the rematch of Oregon and Indiana, and then you got the Fiesta Bowl between Ole Miss and Miami. It's going to be a good one, guys. Let's start off with Indiana and Oregon. Obviously, Indiana got the better of Oregon in the first matchup. But I think it's pretty good. It's a pretty good matchup between these two sides. Oregon knows exactly what Indiana has on tape, and vice versa. Now the question is, will the Oregon defense keep it up against this Indiana offense? That's going to be my take or my perspective, and I guess that's my question. And then my answer to that is probably no at this point. I'm still rocking with Indiana. I think Indiana's going to win 20-14. I think the way that this offense was able to move against Alabama today, and I think Oregon's a better team than Alabama. I'll be real. I think you could even argue that Alabama, I mean, someone could argue that Alabama shouldn't have even been in the playoff, but, people are saying that about Miami, and Miami's in the semifinal. So that's neither here nor there. And I think at this point, Cignetti's just that guy. I mean, he's just that guy. He's that guy. He is that guy. So get used to that name. He's probably the next. They're probably, in the Big Ten. I mean, the Big Ten. How you got to say that the Big Ten's probably. All right, so I'm going to make a comparison between the Big Ten and the SEC. I think the SEC is more deep than the Big Ten, but I think the top of the Big Ten is better than the SEC. I mean, there's a reason why the power ratings were kind of saying that the Big Ten had better teams than the top of the SEC based on the power ratings. Now, I'm not totally into power ratings because that's a whole other ball game, but something to think about, something to consider. And this is if you got to love the parity. This is the most parity that we've had at the top of college football ever. And results of these quarterfinals played throughout this past week is telling of that. It's just telling. It is what it is. Like, if you don't think, I guess argue with the wall because, yeah, it was entertaining. But yeah, I'm rolling with Indiana. Indiana over Oregon. Let's just say, yeah, we're going to say 28-24. We're going to lock it in at 28-24. Indiana's moving on to the championship game. Miami and Ole Miss. This is so fascinating matchup. You got an Ole Miss offense under Trinidad Chambliss, who a year ago was winning a national title at Ferris State in what is traditionally more of a veer offense. Got him coming in, and he's led his team coming after starting off as the backup to Austin Simmons. And I was high on Austin Simmons, but I was like, this Trinidad Chambliss guy is a little bit better, just a little bit better. And but then you got a Miami team that defensively is just hitting on all cylinders. And Mario Cristobal said it in his post-game interview. He's like, Miami is getting better. I don't even think they're there where they want to be, but we can say that Miami's back, guys, at this point. They're in the semifinal. They're back. And then Ole Miss has been in uncharted territory as far as their program is concerned, going back to like Archie Manning. And there was a play where Trinidad looked like Archie Manning. Like he was scrambling all the way back to his left and his right, and then they got the first down. That was nuts. Yeah, anyway, like that, I was just like, wow, that is impressive. Like maybe broken play on Sundays. We'll see though. But yeah, as far as Ole Miss in Miami, I got to give the edge to the defense. So I'm rolling with Miami, which is going to be nuts. And as long as Carson Beck does what he did against Ohio State, why can't he do that against Ole Miss? I think it's going to be another low-scoring game. I'm going to say like 14-10. 14-10. Miami goes on top. So then you got a championship game between Indiana and Miami. Not going to go quite into that because that's the championship game. So we'll have a little bit more on that as we move closer into the week. Obviously, transfer portal is opening now, so obviously a lot of guys moving around. Where are they going to land? We're going to be talking about that more in the future. And yeah, it's been a really interesting 2025 season. There's a lot to kind of reflect on. I feel like, especially in the first season of the Tyler Bright and Early podcast, a lot of ups for this podcast, a lot of great moments of the college football season, a lot that I've enjoyed talking about and kind of having this platform. So I've really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see where this goes in the future. But yeah, that's going to pretty much cover it for today's episode of the Tyler Bright and Early podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Bright, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football centered.